Macintosh is Macintosh Information Technology Limited, also known as Macintosh Consulting, is an integrated capacity building firm that provides exceptional high-quality information technology and business management trainings, with, of course, education and its intervention. Our proposition is actually founded on the confidence that we have helped clients achieve maximum impact from their human capital development in information technology and business management training investment by creating the optimal training program tailored to meet the need of an organization and individual growth at large. So we have quite a number of partners, and as you know, we recently joined the AWS, and we have some clienteles. We have a few of our clientele's logo here, which ranging from GT Bank, MTN, Sahara, Stanbic, First Bank, Nigerite, EFCC, NDIC, AMCON, and quite a number of clients. Now, these clients have been able to trust us over time because we deliver exceptional training services to our clients. Then you have a view of some of our classroom settings, some of the trainings that we've offered. We've offered trainings on several certification trainings, ranging from Microsoft East Council courses, cybersecurity courses, IT service management trainings, and the likes. So why did we actually make this decision to join AWS? I'm sure you're wondering, why AWS? Why did Macintosh decide to join AWS training and certification? The AWS mission is to enable developers and businesses use the web services to easily build and get paid for sophisticated and scalable applications. And AWS training and certifications help to build and validate your cloud skills so you can get more out of the cloud. I understand that because of the pandemic, it's imperative to be vast in IT, and a lot of technology have moved their services to cloud. So we have decided to partner with AWS. We've decided to join AWS to align with the mission and statement to spread across Nigeria and help equip more professionals with vast knowledge in the implementation, the deployment, and use of AWS services through our trainings and certifications. Now you can now relax because we have highly seasoned facilitators who will take you through all the different certification paths that are available in AWS through our authorized instructors. So through AWS driven solutions, we will build a customer-centric environment where clients can find resolution and a robust approach to all their organizational needs at large. So be confident that you're with the right body. So I want us to all sit back and take time to actually ensure that we get to receive from them. We get to really understand, take note of all they will be taking you through, because they are well seasoned facilitators. They have vast experience and expertise in AWS certifications. So let me just introduce you to Cobus. Cobus is a senior developer advocate at AWS, empowering developers to know and understand how best to use AWS. His primary interests are in security containers and DevOps. Prior to joining AWS, he was a customer for 8 years, building in the fintech, healthcare, and online gaming space. During his 14 years of development, he has worked on C#, Java backends. He has done a bit of Android and iOS app development and some game development, one which is available on Steam. In the last few years, he has focused on spreading DevOps best practices and helping companies adopt them. He is also passionate about community involvement and founded the Cape Town DevOps Meetup. Wow. The DevOps Meetup group in 2015 and co-organizes DevOps Days Cape Town. So we'll be having Cobus join us shortly.
Thank you very much for that lovely intro and an overview of what we're doing today. I'm quickly going to start my slides over here. Give me a second to do my screen share. I'm going to be sharing that screen. Start and from beginning, and I just have to pop it over quick. Display settings. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen right now. As mentioned, my name is Cobus Bernard, and I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS. And today, I'm going to be chatting a little bit to you about the relevance of AWS in today's technology. And to do that, I'm going to be taking you through what we see companies doing, what we see their challenges are, and kind of like how they think about moving to the cloud and how they start building in the cloud, and also showcase some of the AWS services, just to give you an idea of what is capable and, you know, how you can start thinking about building in the cloud to stay relevant in today's technology scene. So firstly, a little bit of history. Luckily, not too much. It's just a little bit about the evolution of computing, just to position where cloud comes in and specifically where AWS comes in, because sometimes people aren't as comfortable with exactly where cloud fits into the whole, I've got a server in a rack, I don't need the cloud scenario. So firstly, most people are familiar with physical machines. These are the servers that you put down in your racks or in on-prem data centers, and you need to figure out exactly what you need. You need to worry about the capacity. So what happens is, let's say you buy a server, they typically last for, let's say, about 5 years with normal hardware maintenance contracts. Now, if you have to guess how much capacity you need over the next 5 years, that's not going to be as easy with how things change nowadays, where you can have a very successful app and like suddenly need a lot more capacity on like month 3 of your app where you don't have that. Also, you need to invest all of that capital up front. So remember, these are physical machines, they get delivered to you, you purchase them. There are obviously rental options at some places, but you basically have to purchase them, so there's a lot of cost involved up front. And also it takes you weeks or months to actually get these up and running. So the first evolution that happened was that people started using VMs. So they take these machines or rent space from other providers to actually just run virtual machines. And you no longer have to worry about the hardware. You can say, well, can I get this kind of capacity? Can I get so much RAM? And then you start running your virtual machines on there. And that was a bit better because now you don't necessarily do the CapEx because it might be a provider that provides you with the underlying hardware. So it's operational expense, no longer upfront capital. And you get more scale, and it's a little bit easier to scale up and scale down, because let's say that app of yours that became popular after 3 months, you should be able to ask your provider, hey, can I get more capacity? And then scale out your application to be able to deal with that. Then what we've seen in the last 5 to 8 years is that a lot more people are starting to focus on containerization. So this is instead of installing the app itself inside a virtual machine, because a virtual machine itself still needs an operating system and requires resources to run that operating system. Containers are much more lightweight, and also it makes it much easier to move your application from running it locally to running it in production. It's the container image is what you ship around, and that's how you actually move your application from one point to another point. And what this does is that it allows you to start developing a bit faster. And then what we've seen now in the last few years as well is that you might have heard the term serverless before. Now, just quickly to clarify this, yes, it's an ongoing joke. Serverless still has servers at the bottom. But from your perspective as a consumer, you just focus on the business logic and the functioning of your app, and all the rest is taken care of for you. So you don't have to worry about how much capacity do I need, how many servers do I need? How many VMs do I need? Sorry, I just quickly want to pause. I see a couple of raised hands. Is everything okay? Sorry, I can't get to the interface. Cool. Okay. I'm going to, so there
We'll
will be some
take care
time
of
at the
that.
end. Okay, cool. Awesome. I just want to check. So there will be Q&A later, or multiple Q&A sessions today, and I will be around for them. So I think let's move all the questions to the end of today's discussion. Okay, so on serverless, because the big benefit here is it allows you to focus purely on what the business is about, the business logic, how things interact, not about, hey, how do I keep a server up and running? How do I keep it patched? All of those things. And we're going to take a bit of a deeper look at that today as well. So firstly, just to make sure that, there's a reason we're having this conversation and not just, me talking about random technology, I'm going to show you some data points. So firstly, when we look at staff productivity, compared to before they went to the cloud and after the cloud, what you can see over here is that the difference between on-premise and running in the cloud is that they are able to run almost 58% more VMs per admin. So that's quite a big increase already. And what we also see is that the amount of data that they can handle is significantly more. Now, just take into account, this is still the same people. They've been reskilled and they're now able to run in the cloud, but they can suddenly do more because of what the cloud enables them. And then this is just purely lift and shift type scenarios. If we start looking at when you start building your apps and you start re-architecting them and building them to be cloud native and make use of a lot of the cloud services, we see this increase, 147, almost 148% increase. And that's just for the number of VMs. Then similarly with the amount of data, we see 153% increase. Now, that is a significant change in terms of the efficiency of people working for you and building in the cloud. So clearly there's something here that's worthwhile looking at. So the big question here is like, how are they achieving this? And the answer is AWS. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to be taking you through a lot of managed services, but from the perspective of why are we interested in this and what does this give you? So you can understand what the relevance of, the relevance of AWS is in today's modern technology. So firstly, managed services. What do we actually mean by this? What we mean is that when you look at the operational responsibility model, so whenever you want to run some kind of application, you're responsible for a certain chunk of things. Those things differ depending on where you're running. Now, initially we spoke about starting off with on-prem physical servers. So if you look at the top left and you start with on-prem, let's say you've got your own host and you've got some virtual machines on it. You need to worry about the networking, the power, the building that you run in, the physical security of the building, because you don't just want anybody to walk in and pick up your server and go home with it. Then once that part has been solved, you have to worry about keeping the server up and running. So do you have backup components? Do you have a service contract in place to actually fix it when it breaks? Then only do you get actually what's running on the machine. So now you start off with the operating system. That needs to be patched, monitored, and maintained to make sure that it's actually up and running and reliable. Then you've got the virtualization platform on top of it. Then only do you get to the actual point where it's, okay, now I can start installing my apps. How do my apps actually end up on this machine, etc. And there's a lot more involved than actually just, at the end of the day, running your application. So when you start looking at this responsibility model, if you shift all the way more to the right, to the more serverless type services that I mentioned, or fully managed services, you start taking on less and less of those undifferentiated heavy lifting of infrastructure creation. Because if you look back to why AWS was actually created, is that initially Amazon.com had built up this internal competency of running infrastructure at scale. And they realized that this is something that others probably will need as well, because if you think about it, at the end of the day, you've got a product, you've got a service. That is what your customers want. They don't really care what you're running it on. So why not turn that into a service? So try and make use of these managed services that actually free you up. So looking at specifics now, I mentioned some of these already in terms of just running a database. If you're running it on your own and you want to do self-managed, this is what you are responsible for. You start off with best practices, maintenance, compliance, scaling, everything. And then right at the top, you only get to the point where you start thinking about what does this actually do for my application? Whereas if you go for a fully managed database on AWS, a whole lot of that just falls away. You pretty much focus on schema design, query construction, and query optimization when you deal with it. So this is where you start thinking about, okay, what is my app actually supposed to do? How am I storing my data? Instead of like, is my database up? Is it backed up? So think about that. And what this boils down to is that you want to be deriving business value from when you're building in the cloud and when you're building any kind of system. You don't want to be spending time doing things that don't drive you forward. So for example, this is a slide I often use when I talk about Airbnb, when I talk in deep technical conversations, exactly like how much cost they save moving from self-managed MySQL to Aurora, etc. Where if we take a step back quickly and I ask you, what does Airbnb do? I think most people will tell me, well, they allow you to rent either a room or a house for a night or a week or whatever period that you want. They're not going to answer and say, oh, they are on AWS and they are able to, scale our databases and they're really good at running those databases. No, because the business focus is the renting of rooms. That's the base statement, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to be, for example, someone that you pick because the database runs. That's not it. So the lesson from that is you need to focus on business value, because otherwise you're just spending time building things that your customers don't really care about. So let's quickly look at the business value and how you start looking and dividing it. So there will be 4 main sections that I'll be looking at today. The first one is a little bit on the cost saving around total cost of ownership and how cloud differs from traditional on-prem. Then we're going to spend quite a bit of time on staff productivity, and I'll show you some of those stats already. Then we're going to head over into operational resiliency, which covers keeping your services up and how to think about building services when you build in the cloud. And then lastly, we're going to wrap it up with some business agility, how you can actually start moving faster, because remember, the world is starting to move faster and faster. Customers are no longer happy if your app is only up for 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day, or if you need to do a maintenance window of 4 hours at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Often customers want that app up 24/7 and they are not happy if you have to switch it off for maintenance. So let's kick it off with looking at the total cost of ownership. So I'm going to show you some stats over here from some of our customers in terms of what the cost savings are that they've been able to achieve on AWS. And then we're going to dig in a little bit more into how they achieve this and also the thoughts behind this. Because when you start moving to the cloud, you have to start thinking differently about technology. It's not just, let me take my VM and put it in the cloud. That's the start of your journey. It's definitely not the end. Because there's so many different services that you can actually utilize in the cloud to actually leverage all of these savings and make your apps more resilient and also perform better. So quickly, just understanding total cost of ownership in the cloud, because often what happens is people think, I've got an on-prem server, I know how much the physical server costs, I know how much it costs to give it electricity, network connectivity, and that's it. And then they compare that and saying, well, this cloud VM seems a lot more expensive, what's going on here? And when you calculate that, what you need to factor in is that often things like, for example, the person looking after the data center, the person looking after the operating system, those costs are not included in keeping the actual application up and running. And you need to factor that in. So when you start thinking about more of these, sorry. Okay, cool. So when you start thinking about building in the cloud, it's a long journey. So it starts off with, let's say, just taking your app as is and bringing it to the cloud. And then you start chipping away at it. Then you start figuring out what kind of instance size do I need? Do I need something with 4 gigs of RAM or 40 gigs of RAM? 5 CPUs or 50 CPUs? Then also you start taking elasticity into account, because with on-prem, switching on and off a server is not something that you do often. So you have these massive steps in terms of capacity increases. When in the cloud, they're much smaller and much easier to actually manage. And then we go all the way on to the right, where you start utilizing the managed services, utilizing serverless, and then you get to the true optimized AWS total cost of ownership. And that's where actually, when you look at the sizing here, is like you can run applications in large systems for quite a lot less than you would if you had to try and run them on premise traditionally. So one interesting point here is, for example, serverless. There are a lot of companies that run serverless at very low cost, and very low cost, I mean like a few dollars a month. And we're going to dig into that as well. So firstly, let's talk about your EC2 or your virtual machines that you were used to running. And the first part is instance right sizing, or as it's known, not living with your mistakes. And we'll get back to this quote a little bit later. But when you look at an Amazon EC2 instance, we've got this naming convention where we specify the family type, the generation, and also the size of that. And what this leads you to is that you've got a whole wide variety of instance types. So if I just look at some of the ones available, you can see here, for example, we've got, they range from 2 all the way to 48 CPUs just in this range, and between 8 gigs of RAM and 196. Now, the smallest AWS instance is a T3 Nano instance. It's got half a gig of memory, and it's got 2 virtual CPUs. There's some with 1 virtual CPU, depending on where you're launching and what the configs are. So that's the smallest. And then on the largest size, you can go up to instances with up to 24 terabytes of memory or 448 cores. So anything in between. You can slice and dice just in terms of the CPU and the RAM, depending on what you need. But that's not all. When you start looking at the instances, you can actually have additional capabilities, because some of them are optimized for high clock frequency, so compute intensive operations, or you want to run some machine learning. So you want to add a GPU of some kind, or even make use of specialized hardware like our inferential chips that allow you to run the machine learning inferences a lot faster. And at the end of the day, what happens is that you have more than 270 different instance types to pick from. So think about that on-prem server. You just had that server, you had to guess for over 5 years what you need it for versus 270 instances that you can pick exactly what you need. And if you did pick the wrong one, couple of clicks and you pick the right one. You can always change. There's no long-term lock-in. There's no capital that you spent and now all of a sudden you lose all of that money. Also, you might have seen in the news quite a lot about ARM processors the last while. And AWS actually has got a Graviton processor, and we just launched the second generation of that that runs 64-bit ARM architecture. So if you are in that space and you're interested in the performance benefits you get by running on ARM architecture, definitely have a look at the Graviton processors that we've launched. And then also another thing that often comes up when people build applications is that at the end of the day, the app is good, but at some point you have to save the data. Data has to live somewhere. And there are many, many options. And one of the things that we've seen is that in the last 15 years, there's been an absolute explosion of different database types. Because initially we just focused on relational databases. So your Postgres, your MySQLs, those kind of servers, because that was what was in the market and what was being used. And the reason for this is that when databases were designed, they were designed and built with constraints and bottlenecks in mind. And early in computer infrastructure lifecycle, the thing that was the most expensive was storage. So when they built databases, they focused on, hey, how do we make databases actually perform best on the limited resources which we have, which were determined by the storage. So they went for relational because that's the smallest way you can easily store your actual data, which is why you've got tables and you relate and build them up together with SQL to actually form a query and get the data. But since then, the landscape has changed. We've got cloud computing, we've got almost infinite storage, we've got a lot more compute power, etc. So the new bottleneck tends to be more compute and the number of instances. So this is why we've seen this explosion in what's called NoSQL databases. So not only SQL. And you can see over here, these are just some of the categories where we have managed services available for you. And the reason I'm showing you this is that you don't have to pick just one database. You can pick the database that's right for the problem that you're solving. So think about, for example, if you are doing some kind of recommendation engine, you can do it with a relational database, but it's better to do it with a graph database because a graph database is built to understand the relationship between different entities and objects. That's what it's made for. So think about that when you build your next thing. Another thing with why it's a lot more relevant to be in the cloud is that improved elasticity. So let's dig into that quickly. And once again, play this off against those on-prem servers that you have to buy and possibly wait weeks or months for before you can get them up. So let's say we look at the total infrastructure cost and we look at it over time. And we draw a nice little line that says this is our predicted demand. And this is best case scenario where it's constant and it's growing at a constant rate. So we know exactly what to expect. Well, what that would do is if you are running physical on-prem hardware, you do them in these big steps where you buy one extra server when you hit those scenarios where you're going to go above the demand line. But what happens is that demand is never a straight line. It comes in these waves and it starts and grows. And what this ends up doing is that when you start looking at this is that for the first part, I wouldn't say there's a good scenario to be in because you're either over provisioned or under provisioned. There's a small period of time where you might be right sized, but most of the time you either have servers that are idling and not doing as much as they are, which is indicated here, which is opportunity cost, or you don't have enough capacity. And that's where you lose opportunity because you cannot service your customers. And they say, well, this app doesn't work. It's down. Let me go to a competitor. So it's super important. And the best part there is because you are able to spin up and spin down virtual machines in the cloud in 20 to 30 seconds, you can very closely match what your load is. So think about building your apps to be able to scale up and down as needed. And also a nice thing here in terms of understanding it is that for your non-production environments like dev and testing and staging, you can switch those servers off at night. So there are a couple of ways that you can actually also leverage the cloud, not just for what's the bottom line for my production app, the additional things that you can do that makes your life easier. And then we spoke about serverless architecture, and this is something that I definitely want people to go take a look at because this is super relevant in today's technology scene. And just quickly to understand what serverless is that there are a couple of points. The first part is that there are no servers for you to manage. Yes, there are servers, but you don't even see them or touch them. You don't have to worry about how much CPU do I give my function that I write. You only pay for the value that you get. So how AWS Lambda works is that you write the function's code, and then after you've deployed it, when that function is invoked, we will then execute that code. And that code, let's say it takes 150 milliseconds to execute. We bill you in 100 millisecond increments, which means that if it ran for 150 milliseconds, that'll be 200 milliseconds worth of billing. And that's the only time. If your API is not being called, you're not billed for it with AWS Lambda. So you only pay literally for every execution that comes through, which is a lot cheaper than having, for example, a virtual machine or a container up and running, waiting for requests there and not doing anything. All the scaling is also automated away from you. So in the background, we take care of how to scale out sideways and actually how to handle all of these requests that are coming in. So you just say, how many of these functions can I run in parallel? So for example, you might say, I only want to run 5 because I know my database is a bottleneck. And if I send too many requests to it, it might fall over. So limited to 5. And you can switch that between 1 and 1,000 quite easily. And also the whole entire infrastructure is automated to be highly available. Once again, you don't have to worry about this. And what this does and what it allows you to do is start doing your architecture evolution. Because often companies start off with a monolith, and you might have heard microservices, and everybody wants to start building a microservice from the start. My advice here always is, if you're building a new service or a new product, please start with a monolith. The reason is that you don't want to be spending a lot of engineering effort getting this fancy microservice architecture out there, and then 6 months down the line, you don't have any features out. Build a monolith, and when you get to the point where you need to scale, then start looking at splitting it out. And this is where serverless becomes super useful, especially when you start using it when hosting your application in AWS, because you bring you have your monolith running in AWS, and you start chipping away at it and start splitting off smaller and smaller bits. Because remember, everything runs on your AWS account. You can actually start using all the services available, so you're not limited to just a few of them. And then you get to the point where now we want to start making our app a little bit smarter. We want to add some additional features, and we want to get into machine learning. So just quickly to put machine learning on AWS in context for you. If you look at some of the companies over here, you might recognize some of those labels up there, and I'll leave it up for a second quickly. So the reason all of these companies run on AWS is that we are customer obsessed. AWS builds features for what customers are asking for. So when you look at what we've built, between 90 and 95% of the features out there are things that a customer went, I need to do this, I want to do this. And we listen to all of our customers, and then we realize these are the patterns, let's build these features for them. And what we learned from that when we start looking at the machine learning landscape is that there are usually 3 distinct areas in terms of the type of people that are working with machine learning at the moment. Right at the top, we have what we call our AI services. So these are for developers and people that don't want to build their own model. They don't want to train their own model. They just want machine learning capabilities. So for example, here's an image, tell me what's in the image. Here's some speech, tell me what the text is. Or here's some text, give me the speech recording back to it. And these are what we call our AI services. So these you are able to access with just an API call. So for example, Amazon Recognition. You upload an image with one API call, and then you get the metadata back. So that metadata can be, well, it's a picture with a person in it. They've got a beard, the eyes are open, and they're smiling. So you can get this with one API call. And you don't have to worry about how the machine learning works under the hood. Then you get people that are slightly more advanced, that understand how to build models, and they want specific models, and they've got training data sets, and they want to be able to train their data, but they aren't necessarily infrastructure experts. Because at the end of the day, if you want to train a machine learning model, you need some kind of compute to run it on. There are different types available. So you might know, I want this specific model, for example, XGBoost, when I want to do character recognition. So I know the model I want, but I don't know what size instances, etc., that I need. That's where Amazon SageMaker comes in. So that's a service that allows you to do machine learning by bringing your own model and then your own training data and actually training up your model. And then once it's trained, to actually host that model for you as an HTTP endpoint. So once trained, you just deploy it and you say, well, here I can make a request against it. And then you can turn a couple of config values to increase or decrease the capacity depending on what you want. But you don't have to spin up a server. You don't have to install your model on the server. You don't have to do anything to host your model. And at the very bottom of the layer, we have the very skilled machine learning engineers that are also capable of spinning up and provisioning their own infrastructure. And what we have here on this level is that you've got all of the infrastructure available on AWS to build whatever you need to do, including additional hardware, like the AWS Inferentia chip that I mentioned earlier. So you can actually attach specialized hardware virtually to your machine, to the VM that you're running to make your inferences go faster. There's a whole bunch of other services available for you that helps you with this, but you can either spin up with containers or install them directly on instances. It's entirely up to you, because there are some frameworks and SDKs that help you make this, do all of this easier if you want to play at this level. And speaking of play, just quickly, a little bit of fun use cases of machine learning that people might not be aware of, because typically we think of machine learning only in the business use case and like, hey, how are we going to make predictions and recommendations? So first up, we have got the NFL, which is the National Football League, I believe, in the US. Now, what makes this very, very interesting is that they actually put sensors inside both the players, so on both shoulders, as well as the ball. And then what this allows them to do is that while the game is actually running, they can start inferring and making calculations on what's the likelihood of this specific thing succeeding. Like when the person throws the ball, will it be a touchdown or not, based on past performance as well as real-time data. And they are able to do this in real time with Amazon SageMaker. So that's a fun, interesting way of using machine learning in the real world. Also, for example, for those of you that are petrol heads and love racing, when you look at Formula One, they actually use sensors on the cars, and about 120 of them last time I checked. That generates more than a million data points per second. Now, take a second to quickly. Large database. We're talking 1 million per second, and you know the races tend to be a few hours long, so that's quite a lot of data there as well. And what they do is that they feed all of this data along with additional telemetry and things through Amazon SageMaker. And once again, this allows them to make real-time predictions on, do I have a good probability of overtaking this car or not? What's my pit strategy in terms of how long should I stop? When should I stop? Etc. So useful. Then what we have is we have some slightly more practical applications that some people do. And this is quite a fun use case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, this is a cat. Cats are very adorable. Everybody loves them, except when they want to show you their affection, which they sometimes do by bringing you presents. Now, for a cat, a present is either a dead bird or a dead rat, and they drop it on your bed normally, which is obviously not an ideal situation, to put it mildly. So what happened? There is this developer, and you can see the link down there, and what he did is that he had a whole bunch of photos of his cat coming in and coming out of his house, because he had a little webcam next to his window. And as you can see there, the number of images. Then what he did is he went and classified all of these images as either there's no cat, there's a cat walking away, or there's a cat coming closer, or ultimately there's a cat with a prey. And then what he ended up doing is that he trained the machine learning model to recognize when the cat has got one of these presents. And he built a little actuator on his window. So if he saw the cat coming in with a present, boop, the window would close. So they're quite a fun few things that you can do. But let's get back to the more serious part of the presentation and talk about staff productivity. So we showed you this benchmarking. We saw this increase in percentages where people started becoming more and more efficient in terms of what they're doing. And let's take a slightly deeper look at that, what we've seen when we see people start adopting the cloud. So for example, when you start looking at the amount of time spent on server budgeting and planning, it's up to 90% reduction. Because remember, you can now, instead of having to say, let's figure out exactly what the workload is, future projections, marketing campaign information, how big do we think it needs to be, it kind of turns into, well, this is what we need at the moment. If it's not enough, we can spin up more. If it's too much, we shut some down. So 90% reduction in that. So you can see some of the other values over there. It's like, these are quite high percentage. I mean, the lowest one on here is 50%, which is the installing, upgrading, and removing of software. Because remember, in the cloud, you can automate a lot of this. And also you can even pre-build all of these images. So you can go and create a VM, install whatever you need on it, take a snapshot, and then just say, I want 50 of these. Whereas in the physical world, installing 50 machines takes quite a bit longer in terms of setting them up and doing them. And also another interesting one here is that there's a 100% reduction in hardware costs for hardware failure. And we're going to get to hardware failure in a bit. The reason is that you don't care or worry about the hardware. AWS takes care of that for you. So when you think about building modern applications and how to stay relevant, you don't want to spend time worrying about, is the hardware up? You rather want to be spending time making sure that your application is up and running. So think about when you're running your own data center. Once again, look similar to the previous one. When you look at that whole long list of things that you have to worry about, you are taking on quite a lot of responsibility. You rather want to be focusing on those top three, which is solving the problems, building your apps, and focusing on the product. Everything else is undifferentiated heavy lifting. It doesn't mean that that makes your product better. It just, that's the base requirement to make your application actually run. Now, speaking of keeping your application running, let's talk a little bit about operational resilience, and we'll get to the definition here, so don't worry. But first, let me introduce you to why this is important, because all of us will have users at the end of the day. And what we're going to see over here is a user using our app in a way that we didn't expect them to. So let's see what he's up to. Okay, he's now starting to click on a feature that entering values and moving things around the way that they weren't intended to, and guess what? He goes in and breaks something. The problem is he doesn't break it just for himself. he ends up breaking it for everyone, because in the background you can see the car's actually also stopping as well. So the entire system is down because the user did something we didn't expect. So resiliency, what does it mean? What it means is it's the ability for a system to handle errors and eventually recover from them and recover from unexpected conditions. So we all know to build systems, something somewhere will go wrong, but you don't want your application to be completely down. You want it to be degraded. And let me quickly show you what we mean by partial failure mode. What we see over here is a three-wheeled one of those motorbike taxis, and one of the wheels has actually broken. So the app would have been down, except this is partial failure mode because the app is still working. We're still going ahead. We're still driving. The thing here is that now all of a sudden we are able to, while the app is not performing as it should, and some features may not be available, most people can still use the app while we fix the problem as it goes along. And what ends up happening is once the problem's been fixed, boom, wheel goes down and we are back in action. We're running at full capacity again. And this is where you want your applications to be. You don't want to be spending time with your apps being down for minutes or hours, because the cost of downtime is incredibly high. So you can see over here are some numbers from different company segments with the links at the bottom, the name of the report where they came from at the bottom. So you can see that some of these are quite costly. I mean, look at the second one. Cost per hour, between $500,000 and $1 million per hour for a critical application. Now, granted, these are large enterprises, but this is something to take into account. When your app isn't up, people aren't going to be happy. So what you need to take into account here is that everything breaks. So this is a very famous quote by Werner Vogels, who's the CTO of Amazon.com. And it says, failures are given and everything will fail eventually over time. So at some point, something's going to break. So we have to think about how do we build resilient systems and make sure that our apps are up. And this is where I just want to quickly take you over how AWS thinks about infrastructure and look at our global infrastructure. So you might have heard the term region in the context of AWS, as well as other cloud providers, and also availability zones, specifically in the context of Amazon. Now, what we do is that when we build out a region, we build them with 3 or more availability zones. So what is an availability zone? Well, zooming in, an availability zone consists of 1 or more physical data center. Now, remember, we've got 3 availability zones per region. And the reason for this is that because we know things fail, we build at least 3 independent data centers far away enough from each other so that if, for example, the one's power goes out or there's flood or some other issue, the other 2 aren't necessarily affected by the same thing, which means that you can build more resilient apps by distributing across all 3 of these different availability zones. Now, just quickly to clarify, each availability zone is 1 or more data center. Our largest availability zone actually has 14 data centers, and our largest data center has got more than 300,000 servers in it. So when you think about scale, that's important to know. So now that we have these different availability zones and different data centers, and we are worried about, okay, that's nice, that sounds good because I can have multiple copies of my app running in places, but what happens if the network goes down? Well, the good news there is that we've got highly redundant regional networks between all of them, creating a large mesh network with multiple connections between any 2 data centers and availability zones. So that's not something you have to worry about that. And to put, once again, some numbers on this, when you start thinking about why do I want to move to AWS, why is it relevant, is that you can see over here 56.7% reduction in downtime when customers moved from on-prem to in the cloud based on more than 1,000 customers that we sampled. So you can see over here, there's definitely a reason for this. And once again, some more data points with some more customers that I'm going to leave for you for a second to take a look at with specific numbers and stats around them. So just one I want to call out here is TravelStart, which is a local South African company. And they actually were able to reduce their operational cost by 43% and downtime by 25% just by moving to AWS. So that definitely sounds like at least one good reason and why this is very relevant to today's modern technology and how to build in the cloud. So let's go to the last one, business agility. Now, I did tell you earlier, I made a mention about living with your failed experiments. And this is also a famous quote by Andy Jassy, who's the CEO of Amazon Web Services, or AWS, is that invention requires 2 things, the ability to try lots of experiments and not having to live with the collateral damage of your failed experiments. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, think of that on-prem server that you have. Let's say you wanted to build out a new machine learning cluster because you've got this machine learning model that you need to run. Do you think I'm going to need 10 servers with X capacity, all of that? End up firstly asking for the money and projecting, because that's probably a few $1 million that you need to invest in that hardware to be able to run that. You then go ahead and purchase the hardware, you spin it up, you run it. 1 year down the line, you realize that there's something better. This machine learning model doesn't work. We don't actually need it, or there's something else that we can use rather. Now you still have that hardware. You just spent a few $1 million on it, and you have to live with that failure. Whereas in the cloud, once again, you try it out, you play it, it doesn't work, you shut it down, you move on. So when you start looking at businesses and how they are able to innovate faster while at the same time reducing cost and failure, you can look at some of the percentages here in terms of what we've seen from customers. And when you think about it, it does actually make sense, because these are, you can spin up a virtual machine, like I said, 20 to 30 seconds. You can get a serverless app up and running in a few minutes in terms of from clicking the deploy button locally to your code actually being live and being accessible. This is not possible with on-prem. Also, for example, things that can go wrong. There's a lot of managed services. So just, for example, the second last one, looking at deployments. Often deployment is some kind of handwritten script that does something where it gets code, compiles code, and puts it on a server somewhere. Where we've got a lot of managed services for you that take care of that for you, where put the code in a certain format. Once it's packaged, we will take care and actually deploy it on the server for you, and also keep it there so that when, for example, something happens to the server and we replace the server in or scaling group, we'll deploy the code onto it once the server is booted. So replacing a server and deploying your code on it becomes a non-event. It just happens magically in the background, and you can sit back and focus on what's important, which is, once again, business value. So let's put some more numbers on this for you quickly. So when you start thinking about things that are important to businesses, one of the main things is, for example, this time to market for a new application, because we all know things are moving faster and faster every single day. Having a great idea does not mean you'll be successful. It's the execution of that idea. How quickly can you get it to market, or how quickly can you react to something that's happened in the market? I mean, just take our current situation into account worldwide. If you were able to spot something that people needed with this new set of requirements and get it out to the market quickly, that's great. If you can only get that out in 3-4 years from now, the world might have moved on and moved into a different state, so it might no longer be relevant. So putting a number on that, what we can see is that customers are able to get to market 37.1% faster when comparing to the cloud versus a traditional on-prem. And this also takes into account customers that are used to running on-prem. So it's not just if you're starting out from scratch. We're not taking into account, hey, I need some servers. How do I get servers? Where do I get servers? What size servers do I need? That entire portion is excluded when we start looking at these stats. And once again, to substantiate this a little bit, to give you a little bit more insight, is if I look at, for example, business cases. And here we've got another couple of companies that show you the percentages and specific hard numbers of how they were able to become more agile by using AWS. And especially if you look bottom left, Lionsgate, they were able to reduce the time required to deploy infrastructure from weeks to hours. Now, there's another couple of great examples, one of them being Western Digital that ran some simulations. And previously, when they wanted to run a simulation, it would take, I think, a few weeks to do that. They were able to bring that down to 8 hours. So they can run a simulation overnight and have the results in the morning instead of waiting a month, which allowed them to innovate a lot faster. So when we take all of these different components together and look at every single part of that as a single example, let's take a look at Live Nation. They were able to do an 18% initial savings, then a further 40% savings through just cost optimization, picking the right size instance, shutting things off when they didn't need it. And then lastly, they ended up being able to go 58% cheaper overall. They were able to reduce the traditional type of tasks by 50% and 10 times improvement in terms of the number of new projects. Operational resilience went from 3 nines, so 99.9%, to 5 nines, 99.999%. And that's quite a decent improvement. Also, business agility, able to innovate 10 times faster. And when you take all of this and look at the stats at the bottom, this is where the important part is, that over 17 months, they were able to get 118 apps in the cloud with a 58% saving. Now, this is a large organization, a large enterprise. Now, if they are able to do this, imagine what smaller companies are able to do with using AWS and being able to move a lot faster. So quickly, in wrapping things up, what I want you to take away from today's talk is that first, try your best to always focus on business value. You don't want to be building something that doesn't push your business forward or creates value for your customers. So remember this chart. You will see this quite a few times. And this is one of the things that gets people, because we see the cloud. We know the cloud makes us go faster. We know AWS is where we want to build our apps. The challenge, however, ends with this, which is 88% of enterprises have a cloud-first strategy, but 86% of their spend is still on on-prem infrastructure. And the reason for this is that there is a absolute massive skill shortage. there are simply not enough people that are able to build cloud applications at the moment. So this is a great time to be an engineer, and it's super relevant to be able to build on AWS. And that is what we're going to be talking to you today about, more about the training and certification options that we have available and how you can actually go ahead and start building on AWS in the future. So with that, thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know if there are any questions. I don't know if we're going to do Q&A now or if we're going to do it after one of the next sessions. There we go.
Okay, Cobus, thank you so much for this insightful presentation. You said quite a number of things. You highlighted the importance of machine learning. You talked about the why many organizations are many organizations are making use of the machine learning. You talked about the AWS the AWS machine learning stack. Then you talked about the artificial intelligence services, the machine learning, then you went down to talk about AWS global structure. You talked about how it's fully scalable and then the availability zones. You also talked about the business agility, and you made us to understand that if an organization needs to focus on the business value, then they should consider, the AWS tools. So we have a question for you. Cobus, please unmute. Okay, thank you.
Sure. There we go. Sorry.
We have a question for you. It says, what is the difference between the machine learning and artificial intelligence? One of the audience actually asked the question, and he said that he would like to know the relations to organizations' database, right?
Yeah. Okay. So quickly, the first part of the question is, what's the difference between the AI services and the machine learning services? The big difference is that the AI services are ones that you can just consume. You don't need to be a machine learning specialist or a data scientist to consume them. It's literally, you send data and you get responses back. So we've got ones to do image recognition, speech to text, recommendation engines, extract text from documents, etc. So if you, for example, want to build applications that make use of machine learning, but you don't have any necessarily skills in that area, these services help you to actually do specific tasks that we've built them for. Then on the machine learning side, we've got SageMaker, where this is where you actually are a data scientist and you've built your own model and you want to train your model and then actually run them. And that's where SageMaker comes in, and that's where the big difference between machine learning and AI services come. So it's just an ease of use case there. Then the last part of the question around how does the database come into this with regards to machine learning? Well, at the end of the day, machine learning is there to make an inference based on data that you give it. That data can come from multiple places. For example, you have to write your app to make a call to that service. But there are mechanisms that you can actually connect data and pull it directly from the database and feed it into the machine learning model and say, listen, based on this data, what's the outcome? For example, fraud detection. If you look at the service that we released, you can say, as the data comes in, go pull it from the database, process it, and give me the output, what you think is the result based on these data points that I gave you.
Okay, thank you, Cobus. We have one more question on the chat. Just a bit of, okay, so Martin is actually asking, and he said, what's the advantage AWS have over its competition? Why should I devote resources to AWS instead of Azure, for instance?
Okay, so when you start looking at cloud, AWS has been running for about 6 or 7 years longer than most of our competitors. And there are certain things that you can only learn at a certain scale. So because we've been actually building cloud systems longer, we've actually gone and learned these hard lessons. There's a phrase you might have heard before, which is there's no compression algorithm for experience. There's certain things you only experience at certain points in terms of when you start building your cloud infrastructure and when you start building global infrastructure. One of them being the availabilities that I spoke to you about is that we've learned that you need at least 3 places in terms of when you start looking statistically at keeping an application up with a specific SLA in mind, that you wanted to be deployed in at least 3 locations, which is why we build our entire infrastructure around availability zones, because you have to start worrying about if let's say, if I'm only deployed in one data center and that data center goes down, where does my app actually go? Where is it actually built? So that's one of the reasons. And also, if you look at the market segment, I mean, AWS is used by a lot of companies. And from that perspective, you look at the skills requirements in the market, there are more jobs asking for AWS skills at the moment than there are for other cloud providers from what we've seen. So just from a purely, what should I pick up because I'm looking at the market, I want to be able to get a job. From that perspective, and that's the focus of today, is like, look at all the training available, look at the ways that you can get yourself market ready to be able to build on AWS.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and every other questions we can email to Cobus because of time. So Cobus, you have one more question here, and it says, okay, I think I have, somebody else. Okay, there was one I wanted to pick. I think I might be order dropping. So someone said, is AI same application data? Sorry, is AI same as application data interface, API? That is the first one. The second is said, is AWS at a high level all about offering cloud services?
Okay, so starting with the
second.
Okay, all good. Starting with the second one, yes, AWS Amazon Web Services is all about offering cloud services and products for you to be able to build in the cloud. AWS is a public cloud. And then getting back to the first part of the question around, is AI the same as application data interfaces or APIs as we know them? The answer there is no. The reason is that you build your own API, where our API services, we expose them via APIs to you, but the service itself is an AI service that we run for you. So you can consume them as an API, but it's not an artificial intelligence or an app as such that's running.
So I think it would be unfair. So let me just take the last one. Other questions will be sent across. The last question for Cobus here says, does AWS have any availability zone or data center in Nigeria? Next question is that, can I have my data 100% in Nigeria, considering the data sovereignty requirements? Yeah. That's the last one I will ask, so we can actually proceed to other speakers.
Okay. Yeah. So the short answer is no, we don't currently have any AWS availability zone or region infrastructure inside Nigeria. And when we build out regions, obviously there's quite a lot of thought that goes into and working out how many customers and geographic areas we can service with this launching a region. And for example, we only launched the Cape Town region in April on the 22nd of this year. So we are always reevaluating. We're always thinking about where the next best location for availability zones, for regions are to roll them out. But at the moment, we don't have anything in Nigeria, and there's nothing that I can specifically share about future plans around that. But what I can share is that we do have a service called AWS Outposts, which is where you are able to get an entire rack of servers that AWS manages and installs in your data center on-prem. And that actually allows you to run some of the AWS services on-prem inside the country. And that does enable data sovereignty requests, because that means that the physical server where the data resides is inside your data center inside a specific country. I unfortunately don't offhand know if Outposts is currently available in Nigeria or not, but we can find that out for you afterwards. So from a data sovereignty, yes, if the service is available for Nigeria, then yes, you can actually have data inside the borders of Nigeria.
Okay, thank you so much, Cobus. It's been an insightful presentation. We hope to have you some other time so we can get to answer some other questions that we have here. Thank you so much, Cobus, for your time.
No, pleasure. I actually hope to be back in Lagos sometime soon. My last trip was in November.
Thank you. We'll welcome you when you come.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Cool. Bye.
Our next speaker Bernadine, um, Bernadine Gaffrey. You can see her beautiful picture. She's quite very beautiful. She is the African Training Manager of Amazon Web Services, AWS, a progressive employee with exceptional strategic skills. She engages, manages, and builds relationships, working with business channel and education partners to ensure maximum successful achievement of objectives, ensuring long-term growth. She possesses strong analytical skills and has proven her ability to identify and develop opportunities. She has achieved targets year on year with extensive management experience in IT training, team management, client relations, operations, key accounts, CRM, and as well as business partner management. Now, this is just a bit of her profile. So permit me to introduce Benedy. She will be talking about the introduction to AWS training and certification. So Benedy, it's over to you now.
Fantastic. A very good afternoon to you all, and thank you, Toyin, for such an awesome introduction. I feel like you sang my praises there a bit, and what I'm here for really is to sing yours. We're really excited about this partnership with Macintosh, especially because our authorized training partners are extremely key to ensuring that we're able to extend our reach of delivery, our reach of reaching our customers, as well as our sales reach in ensuring that we increase the AWS footprint in the market. So we're really excited to have you on board. Now, organizations need individuals with cloud skills to help transform their business. AWS training and certification helps you to build, validate your cloud skills so that you can get more out of the AWS cloud. Our content is built by experts and updated regularly, so you stay up to date with the most ready, training that is available. We offer both digital and classroom training, as well as online, so that you can learn at your own place. With classroom training, you learn the best practices from our industry experts. My senior trainer, Musa Nassa, will be joining us following my introduction. And in addition to in-person classes, virtual training, which allows you to take courses from anywhere. Whether you're just starting out, building on existing IT skills, or sharpening your cloud knowledge, AWS training and certification can help you become more effective and more in the cloud. Something that I feel extremely passionate about, especially when we look at students coming out of the market and coming into the market, pardon me, and not having the necessary skills that industry desperately needs. So they come out of university and there's a massive skills gap because they don't have those touch points for them to fill that gap in industry. And what we at AWS TNC are looking at is different programs aimed at starting a career on the ground from school level all the way up to university, right to developing a career with learning paths by industry experts, where you can take your training to become a certified AWS professional. So with that, of course, as stated, very excited to have you on board with us, and I look forward to sharing this journey with you. And as soon as travel permitted, myself and my team, I've got quite a large team here in South Africa. We look after all of sub-Saharan Africa, so that's taking into account all 45 countries in the sub-Saharan African region. We look forward to having awareness webinars, discovery days, and building this partnership and collaboration with you.
Thank you so much, Bernadine.
Thank you, Toyin. With that, I'd like to introduce Musa Nassa. As I stated, Musa is my senior instructor, and Musa is going to take you through some fantastic highlights about AWS training and certification.
Yeah, thank you. Musa is the AWS technical instructor at Amazon Web Services. He's a problem solver, highly motivated IT professional with 14 years of experience in delivering, designing, implementing, troubleshooting, and managing information technology systems. Strong hands-on technical experience on AWS cloud offering and on-prem infrastructure solutions. He has demonstrated capacity to successfully manage all phases of IT projects, from need analysis and requirements definition to the vendor selection, implementation, and training. He's passionate about learning cloud computing technologies and share his experience and knowledge with his customers. So you're welcome, Musa. Musa will be taking us through the learning, the learning paths, career and job opportunities, and leveraging international opportunities through the AWS skills and AWS LinkedIn community.
Thank you so much for this lovely intro. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
I'm thrilled for that introduction, the lovely introduction from both of you. And I'm so glad that I'm talking to AWS customers directly and talk about my passion around the training and certification and what we can offer for customers to help them to ramp up and solve their issue and meet their business objectives. So let's start. 90% of IT decision makers in 2019 believe that there is a big gap in the cloud skills, and they're looking for certified people, looking for skillful people, and they can't find them. And this issue will continue in 2 years from now as well. 30% of the IT jobs will not be fulfilled because of the lack of experience on the booming technologies that we're hearing about. Mr. Kopus also covered the machine learning and the AI, and I will stress around the Internet of Things, blockchain, and the DevOps. So this is a big problem that we are facing, and we will stay facing it for the next couple of years. So in a nutshell, cloud compute is #1 hard skill that all companies needs, and it will be the new norm for everybody to be on the cloud, either fully in the cloud or partially in the cloud, and more people will be required to manage the cloud resources. Today, I will talk about how we can help as a AWS training and certification team to mend this gap and help organization to develop their own resources, which is the best way of solving these issues, to develop your own teams and try new technologies and start innovating in the cloud and build and achieve your business needs as required. AWS, as Bernardine said, we have 3 offerings for upskilling in the cloud. Our offering will be based on 3 pillars, which the first one, it's the digital training, where we publish training authored by professional instructors and validated experience on the cloud, so everybody can learn from their home and in their own time. The second pillar, which is the most effective way of learning, which is the classroom training, where you can see and interact directly with the instructor. The instructor can talk to you and guide you through steps in several ways. And the third pillar, which is AWS certification, which closes the whole loop for the problem of upskilling your team. We will talk about what we can offer on those three pillars. For digital training and AWS training, we have 400 plus free courses. You can watch them anytime. You can just register and you can see the classification and the category of the training available for you. As I mentioned, those trainings built by experts of AWS and validated through a curriculum development team. They are flexible. You can find it from 1 hour training for decision makers and non-IT guys until many hours of very dive deep trainings in a specific topic. Convenient, you can watch them through the internet, and in this era, which everybody work from home, you can use your home to learn. And you can see that we updating those training offer, and we adding more and more every day. Classroom training, which is the most effective, as I mentioned, the most effective way of learning. AWS keep introducing new classes every while to be relevant, and we addressing what's the market needs and what's our customer require and need to be relevant in the IT market. It is very detailed. It is very condensed, which is a 3 days hand-on trainings where you sit with the customer, with the instructor. The instructor will give you labs and will give you tasks to do it through 5 or 3 intensive days. Very efficient way, as I mentioned, because of the human interaction and the instructor availability on that class. We have several kinds of trainings, which is depend on the role based. We will talk about them. They are like for architects, designed for architects and systems engineer, where they need to learn about how to build massive or high scale solutions on AWS. Developers that they starting the development or their application journey in the cloud. Operation for people wanna to operate or to monitor solutions in the cloud, and many more. And recently we started, or not recently, we're talking about a few years back, we start introducing more specialized training courses to the hot topics that everybody talking about, and I will highlight some of those. Those classes as well, they are a flexible manner. You can enroll on a public class delivered by ATP like Macintosh, and you can join as well AWS. They can be also private, where you can train the whole team in one classroom. And now we are talking about the virtual instructor-led trainings. So we have like the 3 choices offered by the authorized training partners in like Macintosh. The certification, it is the best way to make sure that you're hiring interested people and let them run your infrastructure or your applications on the cloud. Also, it's the best way to validate new hires. So if you are hiring people to manage your assets and resources and application, you can be ensured that AWS benchmark them in the hard way. And of course, one of the benefits of AWS certification, that it increased the employee satisfactions, and they will enhance the performance of employees working in your environment. And everybody needs how to administrate cloud resources, because whatever you administrate on-prem, it will be on the cloud. So I suggest for them the operation role or the path.
Okay, so we will just be able to accommodate 2 more questions before we proceed to the next agenda. So I have here, seeing you mentioned jobs, what is the best path to start for job readiness on AWS? I am already certified for the Architect Associate.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's a combination. There is no right or wrong. The cloud will be as I mentioned, the new norm. So there is no right or wrong. But what we anticipating, or if you wanna to see what is the hype and where everybody's going, you can look to their websites. So you can see that we are investing heavily on the machine learning, um, IoT, serverless. So depending on your background, and of course, you're willing to learn or to shift your career, I recommend one of those like IoT, machine learning, and serverless, which require a development background. This is what I see the future of. But for example, like me, I am a infrastructure background. So I'm going, or I used to be in the DevOps realm, and this is the path that I like to stay with, the DevOps.
Okay. So on behalf of some other audience currently asking, someone said that, what is the best path for them to, is a novice and is looking at starting the AWS certifications, training and certifications, but the major aim is to become employable. Like he is really in search of a job. Why do you think he can jumpstart from?
He can, like, as we mentioned in the slides, we have like many paths. So he can start be employable the moment he gets certified and follow one of the paths. So there is no right or wrong path, but he needs to pick up a path out of those. Depending, since he's new in the cloud, he can start with the Tech Essential or the Practitioner certification, and from there he can make up his mind where the right path for him. So like my suggestion to start with Practitioner certification, and I believe during the course you will be introduced to several technologies and paths. You can decide from there which one is the right one for you.
Okay, before we conclude the question, I want to find out, because these are also questions that have been sent in privately. And they're asking that at what particular, let me just give me a minute. Okay, so we have different certifications and trainings in AWS. You have the data analytics, you have the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the DevOps, and he wants to know, out of these different parts, which is like the hottest certification that most organizations are, in search of, like the job, the role, the parts that most organizations really want to employ staff for.
Uh, uh, you can sense that from my presentation, since and Copus presentation, that the machine learning is the future. Machine learning, it will be the future, and we anticipate the gap to be around those areas. Until now, we don't have a certification for IoT, so I can see from the current catalog the machine learning one.
Okay, thank you so much, Musa, for your
Welcome. A
time.
pleasure to be
You've
with
done
you guys.
justice. You've really been, you've taken your time to give us a very insightful presentation. You've been able to run us through the different certification parts. You've told us about the benefits to organizations, and of course, other certifications to look out for or to start it through. To start with, which is, you actually also mentioned the machine learning. Thank you so much for your time. We have heard from the speakers. We've heard from Cobus. We've heard from Benedine. We've also heard from Musa. So I'm sure if you have other questions, you can always send it to us and we'll be glad to respond to you. Before we have the announcement here, and we also would like to use this medium to introduce you to the LinkedIn community, AWS LinkedIn community for Nigeria. So we have the general one, which is the global, and Musa has actually showed us the link. And we also have the community for Nigeria. And the essence is to create an atmosphere for certified and aspiring AWS professionals to connect and network and collaborate. We are to also ensure that AWS professionals can leverage on the platform for various AWS opportunities. We also, it's going to also be a building. It's going to be building it's going to be like a one-stop for all AWS knowledge acquisition in Nigeria. So the link is to join is the bit.ly/AWS Mac. Very simple. Just copy and put on your browser, and it takes you. It takes you directly to the LinkedIn community. I just would like to highlight a few points so that some people may be wondering, okay, what is in for, corporate bodies or schools or education and all that. So we have different parts. We have different programs. We have the corporate learnings, which is majorly targeted towards the organizations and businesses. We also have the education, which is aimed at schools to create foundational skills. We have the academy, which is aimed at couple university content with industry relevant cloud training. We also have the restart. This is aimed at unemployed individuals and also prepares them for careers in cloud and to connect them to potential employers. We also have open classes. So if you're looking at running some of your trainings and certifications, please come to Macintosh, because we have seasoned facilitators. Our facilitators are AWS authorized instructors. So you should be rest assured that you are in good hands. So we have upcoming for this year, September to October, thereabouts. We have to November, we have the cloud practitioner, we have the certified solutions architects, associates, and we also have other dates, the certified developer, the SysOps, the DevOps engineer. So if you need more information about our dates and you'd like to attend the trainings, please feel free to contact the names as displayed. Our email address is info@macintoshconsulting.com. If you want to visit our website, is macintosh.com. And then you have different numbers you can actually call. We are going to be sending out the replay so that you can take time to go through what has been taught by the presenters. So if you are interested in the replay, kindly signify by sending a mail or chatting us in the group. And on this note, I want to welcome AWS to Nigeria, and we want you to be rest assured, our audience, that you will get the best value in terms of the training and certifications.